Hi, my name is Tony Tracy, and this blog is called Please Don't Leave the Most Important Points Until Last. I wonder if you've ever experienced this. You're listening to a presentation which has gone on for a while. It's coming towards the end, and the presenter is rushing to get through all their remaining slides. Then they say, lastly, and most importantly, before rattling through the very last slide, finishing just about on time. I don't remember what the last and most important thing was. I'm afraid the impact of whatever it was lost on me. But I do remember thinking how lastly and most importantly sublimely illustrated what goes wrong if you don't plan and rehearse your presentation properly. But it's an easy trap to fall into. That's partly because there is a world of difference between running through a presentation casually in your head and delivering it for real, which always seems to take longer. But with a bit of planning, it's a trap that can be avoided. Crafting the story of a presentation is a relatively straightforward process, which has 2 steps. Step 1 is to be clear what the goal of the presentation is in the first place, which also needs to consider the audience who will be listening to you. Step 2 is to write a story plan that sets out exactly what your presentation will cover in detail. Setting goals has 2 inputs. Firstly, what knowledge gaps is the presentation aiming to fill, and/or what perceptions are you intending to challenge in the minds of the audience who will be listening to you? Secondly, once the goal is clear, it should be possible to then identify the topics you want to cover and to be able to explain the rationale as to why these topics are relevant to the audience who will be listening to you and how they will achieve the goals you set out at the outset. There are 3 parts to the story plan. The first is the list of topics you've just identified, which need to be put into a running order. Each topic may consist of several points that need to be covered, and by the time you have identified what they are, you will have produced a detailed list of content that you'll need to pull together to create the presentation. Sitting alongside the topic running order and the list of content are key messages you want to communicate. And most importantly, these are the messages you want your audience to take away and remember when you finish speaking. Now, if you think this sounds difficult, or you're finding it hard to visualize the process I'm describing, you can download 2 templates free of charge to help you write goals and a story plan from the Pitch Factory website. Go to pitchfactory.com/resources. Now, when considering the running order, it's important there is a logical sequence to the topics, which means there is a clear narrative to the presentation and it isn't disjointed or chops and changes between topics that are unrelated to each other. If you do that, your audience are going to struggle to follow what you're saying and the presentation won't have the impact you're hoping for. The key messages themselves not only need to exist in your head, but you also need to overtly include them in the slides you create. One of the biggest mistakes is to imply key messages. In other words, to think that the content covered about a topic will in itself communicate the key messages you wanted to get across. Believe me, they won't. Remember, what may appear obvious to you may not be obvious to someone in the audience. That's why you tell them what you want them to take away, for the avoidance of doubt. For example, if your presentation were to explain key services your business offers, it should also explain the value and benefits of those services from the client's perspective. In some ways, that's sort of obvious. Don't assume the audience will automatically join the dots and recognize their value. They probably won't. Instead, tell them why these things are important to them. Having clear goals and a detailed and coherent story plan are the foundations of good presentations and communication. Documenting both not only makes it easier for you to assess whether there's too much content for the time available, but also makes it possible to share your thinking with colleagues, and it makes it easier to ask for help pulling the content together. And if you rehearse presentations properly, which you should always do, then you will be able to tell whether you're hitting the goals you set out at the beginning. And remember, The most important thing should never be last on the list, and it should never be rushed.